Hello, everybody. Hello. Hello. Thank you for keeping the energy and keeping your attention. Hopefully, the breaks are useful and everyone is fully caffeinated and with lots of sugar. So it's really, really exciting to be chairing this session because we are going to see very, very quick snapshots of really fascinating projects developed by charities, businesses, and other projects that are dealing with these issues. And the ones that we've discussed, and you'll see how they cross over many of the themes that we've been discussing so far. And they're great examples for us to be inspired and continue the conversation. How it's going to work is that they're going to introduce themselves. So let's get started.
Hi there. So my name is Jason Williams, also known as the Cloud Gardener. I'm going to try and whiz through this as quickly as I can. So in 2020, I started gardening on my balcony during furlough, and I noticed that there was no gardening media around small space gardening. Everything is always about these huge country estates. So here is my balcony. My balcony is 18 floors up in Manchester city centre. I started a YouTube and social media platform just to show people how to achieve this kind of a green space on the cheap, because gardening media would have you believe that you have to have a lot of money to produce a beautiful garden. Off the back of this, I somehow ended up doing a balcony garden at the Chelsea Flower Show, like you do. And I've since gone on to do multiple different flower shows for the RHS. I also am part of Manchester's local nature recovery strategy, so I'm a nature champion, and one of my jobs is to illustrate grey spaces and turn them green. So this was a show garden that I repurposed and gifted to this community in Moss Side, which is an underprivileged area in Manchester, and I now continue to work with this community and have done for the last year or so to provide them with the tools to do their job. We've heard a lot today about funding and grants and things like that, but one of my main reservations is that communities will reach out, they will grab these grants, the fundings, but they actually have no idea how to use that. They don't know what plants to use. They don't know, even local authorities don't know the difference between spending money on annuals versus perennials. So I do a lot of work within the community, teaching people how to do certain things. Last year, I did the RHS's urban show. So I had the pleasure of doing 7 show gardens at the RHS Urban Show. They happened to be all about showing people what to do with a small space. So I worked with Manchester University, Manchester Metropolitan University, and I designed 4 balcony gardens with those students for my project called Cloudscape. And the idea was to showcase how can we make our towns and cities greener. So when I sat there on a piece of paper and tried to work out how do we actually do that, I realized that it's actually pretty difficult. And so I think what my conclusion came to is that I needed to get young people involved in horticulture and gardening, but I also needed to attract developers and make developers think twice about their shabby green spaces. And then also making sure that horticultural retail knows exactly how they can benefit. So, for example, going to a garden centre and seeing containers planted up to give people an idea of how they could actually plant up at home. So I designed these 4 balcony gardens with the students at the university. Our very first session was how to grow from seed, and we ended up going on to design spaces. A Chelsea balcony garden would be in the region of £50,000. I don't know about you, but I don't think that many people who are renting in the city centre would have £50,000. So I gave my students £500 to their dismay. They did actually manage to create some of those gardens, and they've done an absolutely fantastic job. But what the RHS at the time didn't know was that I'd actually put in for a fellowship with the church. I put in for an application to the Churchill Fellowship. The Churchill Fellowship allowed me to travel across Asia and Europe to study urban green spaces. And I used my understanding there to help me win my application, and I was successful. I arrived in the beautiful Singapore, and I'm going to just show you a quick snapshot. I traveled to Barcelona, Milan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and China. This is day 2 of Singapore. So I'm standing right now on top of the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. And what really struck me after learning the history of Singapore is 80 years ago, none of this was actually here. They were able to construct all of this. So what you're seeing here now is a giant park. You've got 2 botanical glass houses, and then you also have lots of different structures here. And this is one thing I learned in Singapore and in Asia as a whole, is they have a way of making green spaces places to go to. Damn it, time's up. Okay. I'll just end here. So going back to what I was talking about with Cloudscape, what was really important to me is going to Singapore and seeing everything that I was told couldn't be done by developers as a standard. So this is social housing right here. Everybody in Singapore, 80% of the population lives in social housing. They've got green spaces galore, allotment spaces. This is a standard in some of these places, and it's going to be my job to try and bring some of this back to the UK.
Hello, my name's Julie Futcher. I'm an architect, but I work with urban climatologists in trying to understand the importance of built form in modifying the background climate conditions. So today we're going to talk about the limitations of our current approach. And this is a fantastic opening image, which I grabbed because I think it addresses identifies many of the challenges we face. For example, what's going on between the gaps where we live? What's going on at ground level? So I started doing my research in the City of London. Really, I started in 2003. It really picked up in 2008. And in around 2017, I started working with the City of London, measuring these effects. And since 2008, this is how the density of the City of London has changed. This is a photograph from Janet Barlow, who's got a weather station on the top of the BT Tower, measuring all the heat fluxes. You can just see how the city's changed in that time. So I do lots of work in and around the City of London, but today we're going to focus on the Eastern Cluster and what's going on there. That's that one with the red square around it. I haven't got a pointer. I'm normally moving around. It's quite hard for me to be still. As an architect, I'm interested in the role of built form, particularly height-to-width ratio and the openness to sky. Height-to-width ratio, along with orientation, will tell us how the sun's coming in, how much solar access we have, and also help us understand a wind-driven airflow. The sky view factor is also an important geometric parameter. It tells us how much sky we can see and the importance of that in removing heat and pollution. Day and night. I don't know if you can see that, but the City of London, the geometry of the City of London, the Eastern Cluster, is incredibly complex, where a load of really tall buildings have been inserted into a relatively low-lying setting. We need to understand the impacts of these built forms on the background conditions, both day and night. It's particularly important in nighttime when we think about where people live, because of the urban heat island and how we remove heat from our environments. Focusing in on the eastern cluster, here we are in one undershaft, the really dense, probably most expensive bit of barren land you could probably ever imagine. If you've ever been to the eastern cluster, go and have a look around the back of 144 Leadenhall, or also known as the cheese grater, where you'll see this incredible space. Since these buildings have changed over the time I've been measuring this, we've had an increase, we've noticed a significant change in the environment there. But we're reporting here on some measurements that we took a few years ago, where you can see that in the eastern cluster, the air temperature compared to Finsbury Square Gardens, which is just half a mile away, we recorded in the summer an 8-degree temperature difference. 8 degrees in the summer cooler as a result of shading and wind impacts as well. You can see there how fast the wind is. This is a recording I've taken of around 33 meters per second in this space. We were very interested in what this means on air quality and how we live in these spaces. As you can see there, the Eastern Cluster has a significantly improved air quality compared to its surroundings, which is quite shocking. There we are in the middle of the City of London, Greater London. We've got, not only are we finding we've got 8 degrees, we're 8 degrees cooler, we've got some really good air quality. Okay, we don't take this into account. Currently, these are the limitations of what we consider when we're thinking about our urban environment. But when we bring in built form effects, we suddenly find that it's a lot more complex. There's a huge range of things that we need to work on. I'm currently trying to develop this into planning guidance for the whoever DULUC are now. Okay, to explore these relationships and to try and understand what's going on, we run urban climate walks. And our next urban climate walk is on the 1st of March. I've got a poster out there, and you can come and chat, okay?
Right, I'm back, unfortunately, for you. So my paid job is at Surrey County Council, as I mentioned before, as engagement lead across the Greener Futures group. But I'm also part of the charity Zero Carbon Guildford in my spare time, which runs, if any of you are staying in Guildford, it's at the top of the high street. You can go in and check it out tomorrow. We run loads of different projects out of there, community fridge, river water testing. We've got the first community-led E. coli testing lab on the top floor of that building. We run the Surrey Sustainable Business Network, and we run the Home Energy Advice Team, which has surveyed about 900 homes for free in Surrey over the last year or so. So we do a lot of different projects as a climate and environment charity. We work with GCare, Prashant and Jeet a bit on delivering heat cool workshops, which Steph does up there with infrared cameras with the GCare team. One of the things we're looking to do, I mentioned earlier, Surrey's local nature recovery strategy. Within the local nature recovery strategy, as I said earlier, one of the priorities will be urban areas. And about 3 years ago, just before I started working for the council, we had Surrey Wildlife Trust map out what's called URBOAs, so Urban Biodiversity Opportunity Areas. That is basically where the best parts of Surrey are to reconnect fractured habitats. So if you look here, this is the Guildford example. You can see blue there, that's AONB, or National Landscape as it's known now, and at the top the pink is ancient woodland. So you can see how both of those have been fractured by the town centre being built through the middle of them, with the A3 going right through the middle of the town, which obviously was an interesting decision when they decided to build that. So we have, and if you were at Barbican last year, you might remember these slides and me complaining a lot about how hard a lot of this was. But we have had some progress since then, so it's a bit more positive this year, thankfully. So we're looking at these green corridors here and seeing what we can do within them and trying to basically use minimal amounts of cash to drive forward practical, on-the-ground urban greening action. So you might have seen this. This was the first thing that we got involved with. We teamed up with GCare, with Sandfield School, with some parents. Paul's here somewhere I saw before. There he is in the middle waving. And this is the first green gate, so like a living wall, but on a gate, because what we did was we put green screens around the edge of the school, which reduced air pollution by 44% on the school grounds. Is that right? Someone from GCare? I can't see anyone from GCare here. There's pressure. 44%, is that right? So a real impact to the kids. But what we found was because of the gate there, the air pollution was still basically getting funneled down there. So that was the first living gate in the UK. So we got that funded by Reclaim Network. Thank you very much. The next thing we did was we started putting seed and roof on another local nursery. We got that via a grant, and that was in a playground which had no greenery whatsoever. So it gave the kids a bit of access to nature, potential to learn. Looks lovely. The next thing we were supposed to do was a living pillar, which was going to be installed by Angus, wherever he is. There he is. And who's responsible for the living pillar outside. When his team got there, someone was already digging up the pavement. So we still haven't installed that yet. Wasn't expected. I think it's going in February the 13th, is it? So that will be Guildford's first living pillar that goes in, and we've teamed up with a grant that we got through Zero with the County Council to try and hopefully look at how we could get some more of these installations going in the town centre, because personally I think if you've seen the one in the lobby, they're really nice to look at. I think they're a real good engagement tactic to try and push more of this forward. And then the other thing that we did, as I mentioned, this is the first time, and this is one of the complaints I made last year, it's really difficult to get the asset managers who own all the properties in Guildford to actually do a lot of stuff. And we've managed to do this now through some CSR funds, corporate social responsibility funds, from the asset manager of White Lion Walk, the shopping centre in there. So that's what it looked like. They had a table and chairs up there on what was a ridiculous heat trap. It was so hot up there when I went to have a look at it. We went up there, as I said, got a bit of match-funded money from Surrey Wildlife Trust, and a few of us went up there, a few of us in the room went up there. What we planted was in the winter, so it looks a bit barren now, but we put a seed and roof over there. We've put a load of plants that all look good in there, that are good for biodiversity, bats, etc., etc. Bird boxes, bat boxes, so the employees have somewhere nice to go. About 20 people working there, I think. They can go and set up there at lunch, but also it's in a real barren patch of the town centre, like there's nothing else around it. So the goal of this one was to try and show other businesses, other asset managers, what they could do with a small amount of money. So we're turning all of this into case studies. Hopefully we will be able to start putting some of this into action on a much bigger scale, because despite doing some things, this is obviously pretty unimpactful in the grand scheme of things when we think about the rate of biodiversity loss. We've got tree planting coming up at George Abbott School. They keep getting flooded, so we're planting 200 trees for flooding, climate resilience, which is a really good bit of messaging for that. And then we've got Reflection Garden going in at Christ College. Both of those are happening half-term in February, which is the ward. It's in one of the key neighbourhoods I mentioned earlier, and that one particularly has the lowest access to green space of any of Surrey's wards. So that's what we're sort of doing as a charity. There's Angus. I'll be your hype man now. Yeah, that's it. We're just trying to push him forward now.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for the precursor to the living pillar. My name's Angus Cunningham. I'm the founder of Scotscape. We managed to get, this was COP26 actually up in Glasgow. We built a forest in a warehouse in Glasgow. But I'm here to talk about the living pillar. Our passion at Scotscape is to bring biodiversity into our cities using planting, trees and plants. But we have a challenge, the space. There is so little space to plant in our trees. We're an innovation-led company. We had to be innovative to think, where on earth can we put our planting? So we created, we invented, we innovated, we came up with the living pillar. This is a clever way of sustaining long-term planting using solar power on our lampposts. Our thought is biodiversity corridors. It was in 2017, the light bulb moment came, walking around Grosvenor, looking for areas to put green. We couldn't find, after all day walking, we couldn't find one spot to put a living wall or tree planting. So we came up with this concept, and Tony, you're on this video. We built a living pillar. The secret, we did not want to damage the asset. We do not want to damage the lamppost. And if you're up close and personal to 4 meters of planting with the Wimbledon colours, a bit like the purple and white outside, actually, the eureka moment came for me. 2 months after planting, we had goldfinches nesting in the top. And we thought, hey, we can form biodiversity corridors. feeding stations for our invertebrates, for our pollinators, for birds to nest, joining up our green spaces. Same lamppost, different outcome. I'm a hanging basket fan. In my entrepreneurial start in London, we built hanging baskets, we installed them, we still do. But they're crap for biodiversity because they get replanted twice a year. And every time they're replanted, the plants are tipped out. Anything that's habitating in there, our pollinators and vertebrates, get killed. If you put long-term planting on a lamppost, you're going to get a better result, right? Some tech has to be introduced. It's kind of an inhospitable position. So we're solar powered, which is great, big sustainability tick. We have recirculating irrigation, so any water, there's one out, please do talk to us out in the foyer, but any water that drops down to the bottom of the tank is recirculated back through, so no water wastage. We have smart irrigation systems. We're all teched up with an app. Tells us how much water's in the reservoir. If it's very dry, the irrigation will come on. If it's very wet, it won't. If it drops below 4 degrees, it won't water. We need to do all this. It's a scalable product. And then here we get to play. The Clapham Junction. Typically, they're installed off a cherry picker or even a mobile tower. There we go. Horticultural maintenance twice a year, as we do with our living walls. Weekly, we use a combination of perennials and shrubs. Perennials for the pollinators, the shrubs to give some structure to the living pillar for birds to nest in. Watering through I'm talking very quickly, watering through a hanging basket lance into the reservoir. As I say, the water goes round and round, so we have no water wastage. Typically, we fill up once every 1 to 2 weeks, and Ben will report back on your one. But for me, this is the shot. Biodiversity corridors, feeding stations, service stations for our invertebrates as they head down the street. And do they work? Of course they do. We've had goldfinches, blackbirds, robins, blue tits are a favourite. There's a blue tit that we couldn't exhibit last time, Prashant, because a blue tit started nesting in the living pillar. But they work, and this is part of our maintenance. We'll be emptying out, hopefully, whatever's ended up in the nest box in the autumn, ready for the new breed in the spring. And this is up close and personal, 1 minute, with a living pillar 7 meters up in the sky. There you go. It's all possible. And the good news doesn't stop there. With University of Greenwich, we carried out some air pollution research, the blue line being a lamppost over the other side of the street, the red line being on the actual living pillar. 30 parts per billion, small bits, and we can't say put living pillars in and you thought, oh my God, there's fresh air in this street, the wind's coming from too many directions. But if you want data, they do work. Plants have been cleaning the air for millennia. The money shot for me, showing a biodiversity corridor down Clapham Junction. We get pollution relief data. They're fully sustainable using solar power. Of course, there's electricity in the lamppost. We don't need to use that. They can be dismantled, and there's no sign of any damage on the lamppost itself. And just imagine, our streets have been designed around, our cities have been designed around streets. There is so much space there. I've got an ADHD brain. Wouldn't it be wonderful this to happen? And it's all possible. And it's joining up, as we've spoken about earlier, it's joining up the dots and all working together. If there's funding available, we can do this. Thank you very much.
And I'm wearing the same dress. Hi, I'm Hattie. I work for the NHS Forest. My role is Woodland Creation and Tree Planting Project Manager. So I'm in particular funded by a DEFRA Nature for Climate Fund, and we've been planting a lot of trees across the NHS estate, but the NHS Forest isn't just about tree planting, but I'll start with the tree planting. So obviously, NHS green spaces are a neglected resource for health. There's a huge body of evidence about the benefits of green space for our mental and physical well-being. Ecosystem services in a healthcare context, they're really good at filtering air particles, as we've heard today, providing shade, and helping with flood prevention. And flood prevention actually came up quite a lot in our feedback last season for people, for reasons people were planting in these spaces. green spaces are ecogenic, so they, when people have more access to green space where they live, health-related inequalities are less marked. And the Lord Darcy report of the NHS emphasised the importance of prevention and early interventions from a financial perspective, and estimated that in England alone, 2.1 billion could be saved every year in treatment costs if everyone had access to good quality green space. So we see NHS green spaces as pivotal for this work. So during COVID, Centre for Sustainable Healthcare, I should just contextualise, the NHS Forest is a sub-project within the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare. But we ran a Space to Breathe report which looked at across 4 different hospital sites and just got an idea of how NHS staff are spending their time in these green spaces. And there's a huge range of activities, as you can see. And all our work focuses around making it more possible for staff to spend time in green space doing these things. So, as I said, tree planting is key within our project at the moment. So since 2009, we've been planting across the NHS estate, and we've planted over 130,000 trees and across more than 400 sites. At the moment, we're supplying a huge range of broadleaf trees and orchard trees, and we have 4 weeks left, so do shout about it if you can. We also have nature recovery ranges. Now, these are employed by us, but they're situated in trusts, so they kind of form a conduit between the green space and the staff and the patients. So they help staff and patients to use the green space, and that could be through making the green space more accessible through creating better pathways and like putting benches in. But it's also about running activities like to engage nature connection, from bio-blitzes, bulb planting, conservation work, and well-being sessions. We also had a green health routes project, so that was about making and mapping walking routes in and around hospital grounds and encouraging the use of these walking routes. Tree Equity Score we've been involved in as well, which you probably have come across, which is an interactive map that helps address the disparities in the urban green distribution, urban tree canopy distribution, and identifying the areas of greatest need. Then we've got an NHS Forest network, so this is more than 400 members of healthcare professionals who've been involved in making their hospital green space better. And it could be anything from meadow creation to horticulture projects to installing nature trails. So that's a really interactive network. We've been involved in policy work, and we sit on advisory boards for NHS sustainability groups. In the last few years, we've been helping a few sites with mapping and ecological advice and getting them biodiversity surveys so they can kind of start and figure out what the best route is for them. And then we have an annual conference and NHS Forest Awards. And last season, we realised that also there was a huge demand for volunteers in these green spaces. Estates teams are often overworked, like the whole of the NHS workforce. So we designed a matchmaking service, so green space teams can advertise for planting events or other kind of green space work that they need support on. So that's a really good way to link those that can support with those that need some support with a green space. So if you're interested in anything I've been talking about, these are some of the reports that we've got published on our website. But also please sign up for our newsletter and visit our website, because we've got a huge catalogue of amazing case studies of NHS green spaces. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Richard Sabin from Growing Revolution. I've been asked to deliver a case study about what goes on in the real world. So I'm going to talk to you about Canary Wharf and multiple locations where, in my former life at Biotecture, we installed green infrastructure, and their basic driver was around placemaking and wayfinding. And I'll come back and talk a little bit about that in terms of where that was going from. So this is another area of Canary Wharf here, and what I really want to sort of focus back in on and give another opportunity within these 5 minutes is to say to the people in science and the data and the reclaim world is that we need to provide connections through to our corporate clients in terms of that data. There's a consensus, hopefully, within this room that we want to increase the amount of nature that's within our environments, increase the amount of the natural world that people can therefore reconnect with nature. And it's really, really important. But for our clients, it's a nice to have and not a necessary thing. For our clients, Scottscape, Biotecture, Growing Revolution, companies around the world can put in these fantastic green spaces, but they are nice to have, not as important to a client. We can do that outside and inside as a roof or lighting or doors, and we need some more data to help us to talk to clients about the importance of green infrastructure. It's multiple. I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but we all know it's the plants and it's the biophilic element, all of which comes together. Lots of bits of these data are siloed. The bit that's important for us to get commercial clients on board is the bit at the bottom. How does that translate for them through to return on investment? So we know about these multiple benefits, and sometimes I feel that green infrastructure suffers from having multiple benefits. If it only had one benefit, perhaps we could focus on that and we could get some money out of it, because we keep saying, and it does this, and it does this, and it does this. Actually, it does do that. We've split it into 3 areas: planet, people, business. And I've borrowed the phrase of net gain from the biodiversity. Planet net gain, people net gain, business net gain. Now, the planet net gain, actually, when you think about it, just doesn't exist. All we're talking about with the planet is kind of least worst scenario in terms of how we can reduce the impact that we're having on our planet. But people net gain and business net gain really do exist, and they're sort of phrases that our clients really like to understand because they can see some returns on investment. So there's some really good bottom-up data. We did a survey on Blue Monday two years ago. Last Monday or the Monday before was Blue Monday for this year. It's when we're supposed to be our most depressed. We turned Blue Monday into Green Monday, and you can see that there's a bottom-up wish to green up spaces. There are some top-down ones, urban greening factor, etc., but mostly it's people wanting to come back and clients recognising the staff retention potentials of creating really good green spaces around it. Business net gain. If you had to go shopping, where would you rather go shopping? Where's going to get more rents? I could go on for hours about that one. Canary Wharf, the work we did there, placemaking and wayfinding. So Canary Wharf is going through a transition. As you know, HSBC are going out of Canary Wharf into the City of London. Crumbs, what's going to happen to Canary Wharf? Well, they're transiting from being a 5-day-a-week workspace into a 7-day-a-week work, rest, recreate, and even live space. How do you do that transition? Well, Canary Wharf have invested into green infrastructure, into green-blue infrastructure as well, into other spaces to make Canary Wharf a destination space, to transform it from this kind of macho financial centre into having soft spaces as well. And with us, we've been working on them on each of the entrance spaces to Canary Wharf to really try to soften those spaces up. So from a placemaking and wayfinding point of view, that's kind of what we're looking at. And the changes have come about in a very targeted way. So what you're seeing here is the entrance of the Elizabeth line into Canary Wharf. As you can see, the before picture shows a very stark grey space, which is how Canary Wharf almost all looked. Now we've created all of these pocket parks where people can sit. And we're talking about people well-being and business well-being. Canary Wharf have invested £1.5 million a year, and they did it for 5 years. I think we're in year 4 and year 5 right now. And they have transformed their environment by doing so. And they've placed the value upon green infrastructure. So my real-world example here is just to show that there are all these multiple benefits that sit on there. But the bit at the bottom is what our clients are interested in. They're interested in understanding where their return on investment is going to come. And what I need science to do is to be very targeted towards understanding those benefits, but also can we start to move across into understanding the return on investment for the clients. And don't forget the soft science like people's well-being. We can win clients over in their hearts really easily. I can show one CGI to a CEO and he'll be blown away. He also wants to win. You also got to win over his head as well in terms of numbers and how that all works. Thanks very much.
Daniel Green.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity of talking to you this afternoon. My name is Mark Gush. I work for the RHS, and I lead a research group there called Environmental Horticulture. I'm based at Wisley, and today I'm just going to be talking to you about a case study to do with one of the ecosystem services, and that's to do with sustainable drainage systems. So sustainable drainage systems, as you know, they can be really effective in managing stormwater runoff in urban areas, mimicking natural processes to reduce flood risk, improve water quality, recharge groundwater, mitigate heat island effects, support biodiversity, and create aesthetically pleasing landscapes. However, there is limited observed data on the hydrological effectiveness of different SUD systems in different environments. So this study aimed to address that challenge. It was carried out in the fifth and newest garden of the RHS, which is Bridgewater, which is situated in the Salford area near Greater Manchester. The main visitor car park, which is approximately 18,700 square meters in size, was constructed using a combination of permeable, loose aggregate, impermeable asphalt surfaces, and vegetated areas, including a large swale. Underneath, it is impermeably lined with land drainage installed to discharge all water via a single outlet pipe and monitoring point into a detention basin, which you can see in the illustration. This presented an opportunity to monitor rainfall and runoff relationships into this and out of the system. And rainfall was measured by an automatic weather station situated approximately 250 meters from the site. Runoff and drainage from the site were monitored at the single discharge point for the system using a dual technology flow monitor, which recorded stage height in millimeters and flow velocity in meters per second at 2-minute intervals. And then the resultant flow volume calculations accounted for the internal dimensions of the pipe through which the water flowed and were converted from liters per second to millimeters. And monitoring took place for a year, continually from January 2022 to January 2023. So looking at the top left figure, results from the study showed that there were regular rainfall events throughout the year, but peak rainfall periods were in the winter. Corresponding runoff mirrored this pattern and flows were well aligned with rainfall events. Looking at accumulated volumes in the bottom right figure, by the end of the monitoring year, total rainfall was just over 1,000 millimeters, while accumulated runoff was 863 millimeters. So avoided runoff from this system was 138 millimeters, or approximately 13.8% of rainfall. And that equated to 2,588 cubic meters of less runoff from the site over the whole year. However, the peak of avoided runoff was observed 9 months into the study, in November 22, when there had been 648 millimeters of rainfall and just 344 millimeters of runoff. At that point, avoided runoff had already amounted to 304 millimeters, which you can see in the illustration on the bottom right, and that was 46.9% of rainfall, which equated to 5,679 cubic meters in runoff from the site over a 9-month period. Over the subsequent months, volumes of runoff consistently exceeded volumes of rainfall entering the site, which was unexpected. This suggests that there were supplementary sources of water into the site over this final 3 months. So in conclusion then, this study showed that the SUDs delivered significant water management benefits. Of course, this highlights the importance of a systems approach to green spaces. In other words, that hydrological impacts of small-scale interventions influence wider-scale hydrology. For example, the cumulative impact of gardens and green spaces in terms of their extent, location, and ecosystem services that they deliver is substantial. This is the kind of data and evidence-based guidance that stakeholders need to drive sustainable green-blue infrastructure projects. There are several additional RHS case studies that have been done, studies on hedges, peat-free growing media, and rainwater harvesting, for example. And I'd also encourage you to speak to Dr. Tiana Blanusa, who's also here today. Finally, just to mention that we held the 3rd International Greener Cities Symposium at Wisley last year, and we anticipate that the proceedings will be published by the ISHS later this year, with loads of great examples of research into greener cities, so do look out for that publication when it comes out. I'd just like to acknowledge the RHS colleagues who've assisted with this study and the support provided by United Utilities Group towards the costs of the flow monitoring equipment and the data supply. Thank you.
Daniel Green?
Hi there. So thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Daniel Green. I'm an assistant professor in nature-based solutions at Harriet White University in Edinburgh. I'm also a research associate at the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh, which was partly helped by the Reclaim Network, where I did a knowledge exchange secondment visit. And I'm also a visiting researcher at the National Green Infrastructure Facility down in Newcastle, which is where I worked prior to my current position. I put a QR code, this will be on the last slide as well, but I think this links into some of the discussions that we were having in the previous session around sort of willingness to pay for green roofs in cities. We've got about 380 responses on that survey, but I thought I'd put that on the slide today because I think it's quite useful and relevant to what we're talking about. So my sort of main research areas would be split into a number of themes, the first of which is numerical flood modelling. So this just shows some sort of images from a surface water flood event in Loughborough, where I did my PhD. I've also got some research interests in urban and flood risk vulnerability and mapping. So this shows flood restrictions for emergency responders within the city of Leicester. So we found actually that emergency responders were unable to access large parts of the cities during pluvial or surface water flood events. And this really restricted, emergency responders actually getting to incidents within timescales. Within fluvial flood events, it was very restricted and quite obvious along the river channel, but surface water flooding, the impact was very, very sort of distributed and impactful, like spatially across the city. I've also got an interest in experimental research, so rainfall simulators and lysimeters, how we can use lab-based approaches to understand urban hydrology. And I think the thing that really brings this together is green infrastructure. This can be a solution for solving all of these issues. So I'm going to talk very, very briefly about some work that I did in my previous job now. So we set up 4 large-scale lysimeters. So these are essentially like monitored rain gardens in the field. And here we split them into 2 hydrologically isolated cells based at the National Green Infrastructure Facility. Now, the idea behind this was actually getting data to support. We know that green spaces in cities are good, but we wanted to know how well they're functioning from a hydrological perspective. So these were commissioned to provide pilot-scale analyses of rain gardens operating both under natural weather conditions, but also simulated weather conditions using a runoff simulator. These were identical in design specifications, apart from featuring different plant vegetation. So we can see here the scenarios. We had a bare earth control situation and the amenity grass, which is just shown on the video, and then 2 shrubbed species representing different evapotranspirative behaviours. This just shows a bit of a cross-section through the SUDS soil profile, so kind of similar to what would be suggested in the Syria SUDS manual, but also international design specifications. And in that, we had a distributed in-situ sensor network to try and measure some inflows, soil storages, and outflows to understand mass balance, both on a storm event, but also long-term functionality and performance of these green infrastructure devices. This is available online in real time, so I can share the link with those that are interested. And this just shows a bit of a cross-section of what was within these systems. So I don't have time to show some data from this, but we had about 140 variables being reported at 5-minute intervals. Now, translating that into kind of real world. These were like functional systems, but this shows some work that I've done at the Botanic Gardens. So at the Botanic Gardens, there was in Edinburgh, there was a very big problem with flooding along the footpaths, and they would have to close off sections of the gardens due to, maybe 5-6 times a year due to rainfall. As a result, a rain garden with an amended soil was put in place to try and reduce this impact. And we can see here, I've just tried to summarize very, very briefly the infiltration rates. We see that it's a bit higher than what the the Serious Suds manual suggests. I think they suggest 100 to 300 millimetre range, but here we're seeing 320 to 480 millimetres per hour. But before we see that, infiltration rates were very, very slow due to the clay soil. And yeah, I'll just quickly wrap up on some sort of future laboratory research, which kind of brings all of this together. A lot of the work that I've been doing is in the field, and that's great because we can test these systems under natural rainfall events. But when we want to have complete closed environment, total control over these systems and really understand how they function under design storm events, we've recently got this new slope facility at Harriet White University in the last 3-4 months. So really excited at the potential that that brings. Currently got a EPSRC Impact Accelerator Award to try and get this all commissioned, but really excited at the kind of possibilities from this, from a sort of playing God. We've got the rainfall simulator, the soil slope, and then we can measure the outflow as well. So I'd be really keen to discuss sort of the water quality and also biodiversity within a laboratory space. So sorry I've gone over time. That QR code is up there again, but thank you for letting me talk.
Hi there, I'm Ali Clark and I'm the Programme Manager for Surrey Hills Arts, and that is a partnership between the Surrey Hills National Landscape and the Arts Service for Surrey County Council. We're all about connecting people with nature. The more people understand and are in contact with nature, the better their well-being and the more likely it is that they will respect and look after it. And I'm going to talk briefly about quite a small project, really, Habitat, that some of you might have experienced at the 2023 Reclaim conference, where I gave a guided tour and we did a workshop. We ran a pilot project here on campus at the University of Surrey. Habitat is all about addressing biodiversity and the effects of climate change with a multidisciplinary approach. We worked with a landscape manager, an ecologist from Surrey Wildlife Trust, and a mix of artists, experienced and emerging, on our pilot project, which was funded by Arts Council England. In learning from each other, we co-created an area on campus. And it was important for the artists to learn about the potential species that they could attract and support through their pieces. And interesting to see all the various ideas that they developed in communication with the ecologist. On site, those works included solitary bee architecture by sculptor Will Nash, which was a system of nest holes easily disassembled for harvesting cocoons, and a reconfigured cycle rack, which was in the waste section here at the university to go into landfill, which was cut up by artist Amy Haig into 600 pieces as part of her dome structure, and just the right diameter for slow worms, and it enclosed some deadwood for stag beetles and other insects. With every project we deliver, there's a huge outreach element. For Habitat, we wanted to keep that very local, and we worked with many communities just on the doorstep of the university here. We were very aware that people in the local area, some people don't have their own gardens. The artists work with secondary school children, young people with disabilities, older people, and others to create their own mini habitats. The Royal Horticultural Society approached us when they heard about the project and invited us to showcase it at the Garden Festival at Hampton Court. And things aligned when the Reclaim Network also approached us about sponsoring a couple of new works to showcase at their next conference, along with the workshop. So I was able to invite a couple of the artists to create some new pieces. These are fairly small scale pieces with small amount of funding. It was nice to get like a completely different audience there, and from like teachers to gardeners and designers that could come up and talk to us about the pieces and take part in, we had hands-on workshops there as well. And to cite those pieces after the Reclaim conference, we approached Watts Gallery, which isn't far from here, Watts Gallery Artist Village. And they do a lot of work making their extensive grounds more ecological and all sorts of things that the head gardener has put in place there. And so they were delighted to take these pieces. And I think what we haven't talked much about is the aesthetics, and I think that that's something that this sort of project can really offer, because we talk about the well-being of being up close to nature and of air quality, but actually I don't think we should underestimate the effect of just being in a well-designed, interesting place with interesting things to engage with. One of the habitat artists, Will Nash, has also created lots of Swift Towers, image there of the one in this borough, in Guildford. So these are future plans. We really want to roll the project out across the county. Time's up. Yes, if anyone would like to get in touch, then here are my details. I'm going for funding for the project, and it would be great to hear from anyone. I intend to work with placemaking colleagues at Surrey County Council and get more habitat structures out there. And I'd say do consider working with artists, because they're creative thinkers and researchers naturally. So I'm sure they could offer something more to what you're doing. Thank you.
Hello, feels like I'm speed dating on green infrastructure. I've got 5 minutes. Brilliant. Thank you. I'm Charlotte Glazier, and I am going to share a little journey in 5 minutes. And look out. Child-led green infrastructure, greening ahead. So, yeah, I'm going to share this little journey, 5 minutes, let's see how we go. So I'm a landscape architect, and I've worked for 20 years across 3 local authorities in London, so namely Southwark, Lambeth and Islington. So everything I do is very much urban greening related. I'm also a mother, which is relevant because I now view the city through the lens of a child. And we also live in an area of green deficit, so it's very... Sorry. So it's very, so very sort of relevant, the fact that with a young child in the city, we're not really getting the experience that we'd like to have. And so the journey I'd like to share is just a sort of lifelong block, really, or the fact that I've been in this space as a landscape architect, working in local authorities as a project manager, delivering public realm projects, but with the highways, there's been the block that there's no revenue for green infrastructure, and working with highways engineers, they're really not that amenable to green infrastructure as it's not their expertise, and they have a tendency to draw circles on plans to say this is where you put your green infrastructure in. So it's not been very fulfilling. So there hasn't been the buy-in from local authorities, and there's not been the revenue. And obviously in 2019, about 70% of local authorities declared a climate emergency, and that's when suddenly, we're all in this space where we can now start to shift interventions in the public realm. And in 2021, I was then able, finally, to push an open door and create innovative programs such as Islington Greening Together, which was a community-led borough-wide greening infrastructure program, where the communities would propose green infrastructure and then care for them. I keep drifting over here. I don't know why. Sorry. And so the sort of outcome is that the revenue burden would be removed from the council and the communities would be empowered. And then I had another idea, which was for the green finance of Islington Pocket Park Framework, which was looking at the scale up of pocket parks and seeing what we can do, what sort of blockages we can unblock and look at alternative green finance routes, which were mentioned in the last conversations. So that's where I was. I finished that research, and there's three things. One is that the environmental benefits, obviously multiple beneficial, but they're not scalable and they're not getting the return on investment. Secondly, in terms of the economic benefits, we all know them, but who would actually invest? Possibly companies like Aviva, because if we can reduce the flood risk, then that's going to reduce insurance risk, and so, but I'm not Aviva. I can't tell them what to do. I can't tell them it's a really good investment. So what do I do as my own? What is my personal impact? So the message to you I'd like to share is, one is about, first of all, actually, we're now in a position of being able to break through the blocks. Secondly, is about what is your personal impact? What can you do? What can I do? And so I got to a point that actually, as a mother, living in an area of green deficit, knowing that actually the social uplift is the untapped area to deliver green infrastructure, and the problems around the revenue and lack of maintenance and no stewardship, that this was the area that I needed to focus on. And I'd obviously tested that out through various programs. But what I hadn't done was look at it through the eye of the child, because it's always been too difficult for local authorities to actually, safeguarding all sorts of aspects of how do you engage children in the public realm, not just in the schools, not just in the community gardens or the parks, but in the public realm. So we've got local deficit. This is not a new problem. This at the top here is a wonderful woman called Elizabeth Rossitier, who 150 years ago was talking about green social prescribing in Southwark and the inequalities, and we're still in the same space today. So October the 7th, it was UN World Habitat Day, and I made a pledge to try and ignite a child-led urban greening movement, as you do. And so since then, it's been going great guns, and over the winter, I did a pilot with our local school in looking at, one, connecting back to nature. So we did an after-school club, and it was profound. It was really profound. Just actually children going out, not being rushed along to school, and just being, you can just walk anywhere. You can explore the environment and support you in that. It was profound. And we're talking about primary school children age. And, then the next question is about canvassing. So the first one is about connect. Time's up. Connect, canvass, create, and care. So looking at creating a new stewardship model involving young people with a whole major wireframe of other links and opportunities ahead and alternative finance routes. So I'm very keen to collaborate, share learnings, work with you in whatever which way as a research, scaling up. So if you want to find out more, get involved, share what you're doing. I'm all ears. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I'm sure that you might be having some questions, but in the interest of time, we will go for nibbles, just next building. So maybe you can interact with the speakers and you can ask any questions you may have. So what I'm going to do is like to first thank all the speakers. Maybe we can give a big round of applause to them.